This episode contains explicit language. Listener discretion is advised. Family is complicated.
Do I want to call my dad? No, I don't want to call my dad. Do you want to call your dad? No? Do you want to call your dad? Does anybody want to call their dad? Okay, nobody wants to talk to their fucking dad, so...
Especially if your family runs a media empire.
You know, Waystar Royco, we do hate speech and roller coasters.
Has tremendous amounts of power.
Sometimes it is a big dick competition.
Are willing to humiliate and undermine you.
I love you, but I can't fucking stomach you.
And are wealthy. Like wealthy.
Here's the thing about being rich. It's fucking great.
If your family is even half as complicated, you might appreciate the Roys of Waystar Royco. In 2018, the award-winning show Succession took us inside the affluent, dysfunctional world of the Roys, granting us insider access to the most elite, sophisticated spaces in the world as a backdrop for ugly acts of emotional betrayal.
We very much wanted the atmosphere to be one that sabotage could be happening around any corner.
Even though they're surrounded by quiet luxury, their lives are a constant battle for attention and respect. Succession is a beautiful world full of people having a terrible time.
These billionaires had no idea how lush their world was around them. Everything was taken for granted.
And none of that would have been possible without these two collaborators.
I'm Stephen Carter, production designer.
And I'm Patrick Capone, director of photography for Succession.
I'm SuChin Pak, and this is On Set With from HGTV and Max. Each episode, we take you behind the scenes of the most iconic on-screen worlds with the people who made them real. Let's go on set with Succession, with the creatives who brought it to life. Succession was a perfect storm of talented cast, excellent scripts, and brilliant crew. So as a production designer, Steven says his mission was clear from the start.
My guiding principles were, one, to be as realistic as possible for the wealth bracket of the Roy family, but also to give the most flexibility to our directors and cinematographers and the actors to really create the best possible scenes they could imagine. And because we're shooting 360, sometimes with as many as 3 cameras, for me, that really meant creating a very dynamic world that could be shot in every direction.
As a production designer, Steven's role is to design the overall physical world of a show. But as a director of photography, Pat's job is to think about how to capture that physical world with the camera. And his approach was fairly psychological.
One of the aspects I brought to it every day is that these billionaires had no idea how lush their world was around them. Everything was taken for granted. The sets that Steven built, the locations that we chose.
But this place is sick.
Oh yeah, it's Fashion Week. All the good penthouses are gone.
Oh. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure, it could be way better. I just don't know how.
Subliminally, we would show these sets kind of in the background of the story. We wouldn't do huge establishing shots. We wouldn't do inserts of jewelry. We wouldn't do inserts of artwork or wardrobe. It just flowed, and it was always on the screen under the radar. And then Mark Mylod always insisted that we find the underbelly of the scene, whether we're at a convention center, whether we are at a hotel, the kitchen help, how the food gets in, the lobsters that are thrown out. All of that was a sense of reality that the Roy family never existed. And the only thing we felt the Roy family couldn't control in all billionaires was the weather and their health. So when it was raining, we were more than happy to get the cast out in the rain and shoot in the rain. And they would just run from car to door to front door.
We really tried to make sure that the wealth wasn't fetishized in our approach to it, that the characters really were somewhat, numbed to the incredible wealth that they, are privileged enough to have at their fingertips. And as such, we weren't featuring, labels so much. We weren't featuring the bling of it all.
Strategize my gift. What can I get him? He'll love.
I don't know, my dad doesn't really like things.
It's like things.
No, not really. Just, look, everything that you get in will mean an equal amount of nothing, so make sure it looks like 10 to 15 grand's worth and you're good.
We set a lot through scale. We tried to make sure that our spaces were big, and that was multifunctional. That was because we wanted room to get the cast and the camera operators moving in great ways, but also because in New York City, scale is, space is money.
So what do you think?
Of this, I think it's huge. It's a very large space. What's the footage?
I don't know. Developers overestimated demand, so I bought all 5 units and my guy's gonna flip them.
Yeah, because it's an abundance of footage, an embarrassment of footage.
But once you look inside those absurdly spacious New York apartments, you start to notice that they're gorgeous, but kind of sterile.
In creating sort of the void, the emptiness in the world of their wealth, one of the things that I tried to do was to make sure that nothing felt terribly personal. Like the choices felt like they were done by a staff who had been hired to decorate, that were all probably a little terrified that they were going to lose their jobs at any moment. And so, they made choices that were current to all the popular magazines and the, high-end trends, but they weren't necessarily showing anything about what type of art Logan loves per se, or the quirkiness of a piece that Shiv is really connected to. They're a little bit at an arm's length from any of the characters.
Got you something.
Oh, thank you. Nice. Oh, nice houses.
Yeah.
Lovely.
These are our houses, Dad. They're all ours.
Really?
Yeah, Malibu. You remember?
Quality work.
Early on, the team had some big decisions to make, like how and where to build sets they knew they'd shoot in all the time, like the Waystar Royco offices. Building that set on a soundstage would have been easier in many ways, but Steven pushed for a real location, in an actual office building.
I pushed very hard, but with a lot of support, I think, from Mark Mylod and from Pat and others, to move that out of the stage world and into a practical location. And the pitch was, we're going to give up a lot of control over weather, over the natural light that comes in through these windows, but what we're going to get is a reality and a non-canned feel that is going to be the thing that really makes this set fantastic. And I was really happy when Jesse and Mark helped nail that choice down. Of course, then we actually had to deliver it.
They found a home for Waystar Royco in an empty floor of 7 World Trade Center, which worked beautifully for seasons 1 and 2. But for season 3, that space was occupied, so they had to find a new office space to rebuild the entire set in. Luckily, they found another empty section at 4 World Trade Center.
But what we found was we were 20 floors higher. And I felt that we lost a lot of the buildings we were able to see tops of buildings in the first 2 seasons, and we were not so easy to see them once we moved to the high locations. So we almost had to change some camera angles. I would try and get actors closer to the windows, and we'd get the camera operators higher to be able to see tops of buildings and around, to have that same feeling that it wasn't just up against empty sky. But that's a metaphor for our entire show, because when we went to work, we had no idea what the weather was going to be that day. And at the beginning of the scene, it could be overcast, and by the end, it's sunny. And that was a perfect example. If they were going to move that location to a stage, I don't think I would have been so excited about working on Succession, because that whole set was as if you were shooting on a rooftop somewhere. After season 1, I started studying White House photographers, because they are in a situation where they need to photograph very important people. They can't light them, and yet they come up with phenomenal photographs. And that's kind of how I embraced Waystar. And there were times there was hard, screaming light coming into Shiv's office, and we just was able to put the camera in the position that it balanced. And, well, she was amazing. And when you bounce light, her skin is amazing. But controlling that hard light early in the morning was the most challenging and rewarding for me.
Every time you saw night coming on in the offices, or sunrise, there were times that we got in very early and started shooting early in the day, or just to see through all these windows, the light slanting across and that it's very hard to do on stage to do well with that much glass. And I feel like it's subtle. It's not something that, the audience is going to go like, oh, wow, check that out. But they feel it every time we're in there, I think. And it really adds to the sense that this show, that the details are important.
Waystar Royco wasn't just surrounded by windows letting in light. The offices themselves had walls made of glass, which gave Pat some creative opportunities, even if it made it harder to shoot.
The reflections. When in doubt, we would use these reflections. And when we had the cameras in the reflections, the grips would put up solid blacks behind the camera operator. So it just looked like another solid wall. And we could shoot 360.
Yeah, we really early on embraced the challenge and the opportunity of reflection in that set. And, I wanted to make sure that there were lots of opportunities for the plot to be sort of pushed forward by eavesdropping and people catching sights of other people having conversations, maybe hearing them, maybe not hearing them.
So your dad's in?
Yep, he made it in, which we were all delighted about.
You were delighted about?
Sure.
What's the story?
No, he's great. He likes to remind us he's still alive. It's great to get his take, but he needs a lot of rest.
Yeah.
Dad, hey.
Mr. Roy.
Just talking about you.
Logan, it's just great to see you.
In order to give Waystar that glass fishbowl feeling, Stephen made sure he had an accurate sense of the logic behind office layouts.
Well, Stephen was really clever in understanding how corporate America is set up, much more than I know. It sounds very obvious now, but he studied this and he got it correct, and it helped, that it was all in descending order. So you had Logan, you had Jerry, you had Kendall, then you had Shiv's office. Did Shiv have an office the first time? No, then it was Roman.
It was Roman.
And then it was...
And Frank minding Roman.
I gotta go.
Roman.
Frank.
Good morning.
Correction. It is not a good morning from my POV because you're here and I fucking hate you.
Yes, and Frank...
They had to join.
They had a door that he can watch him, and it all descending order. And you could put a lens in one room and spy on all the other rooms.
But this approach requires a tremendous amount of thought and logistical planning when you're bouncing light and catching images off so many layers of glass.
How many layers can we get away with before it's too visually confusing? Each layer of reflections is kind of a crazy randomizer when it comes to how much visual chatter you get out of it. We were trying to come up with a really great balance of how many layers are the right number of layers and where were the best ones and how could you control them. And, so each layer of glass had some shades that could come down and would help minimize light coming through and reflection in them. But we very much wanted the atmosphere to be one that, sabotage could be happening around any corner.
So what's going on back there in my dad's office? You got any back channel White House contacts in there or what? I'm joking. Right. You can't tell me that.
Right.
One thing you have to realize about Succession, and this isn't mean to get off the subject because it's very important about the reflections and the spying. We shoot a scene from the first word to the last word without cutting the camera. It could be a 10-page scene. And we need to be able to know the hit points of that scene. Okay, this is going on, but at the same time, this is about the ocean cruise liners, women being thrown overboard. So you need to tie in a young woman like Shiv and Jerry, who's a woman in this corporate world that lived through it all. And these underbelly plots was what helped us get through these 10-page scenes and the camera operators being able to catch these looks to other people. Getting back to the story of Waystar, having all the glass, having the reflections, having the descending order of the offices made that so much easier for us. I mean, I loved every time we brought Kendall from the elevator to his office and shooting through the bullpen or shooting from inside his office through a reflection. New York City was always there.
Once they mastered shooting in the Waystar Royco offices, that set led to some of their favorite moments.
There's a scene between Kendall and Shiv at night in Logan's office. We kept the city alive outside. And it's the first time I think that Kendall really ever opens up to Shiv in the show.
Can we just talk? I'm not a fucking dummy. There's an atmosphere.
Yeah, I don't know. He's just maybe he's concerned about me for whatever reason.
Well, for whatever reason.
You'd need to ask him.
And it was just fun to do. And we started with close-ups, and then we would let them get their performance just right.
You can't tell me? You can't tell me what's going on?
No.
Fucking look at me.
Shiv, it's not going to be me.
All right. You want to tell me why?
And then we would drop back to these balanced shots of the city and reflections, and not so much about my work, but I think that was just a scene that played so beautifully in,
your work
Waystar.
was gorgeous, but part of it was, I mean, that scene had this incredible emotional resonance because, you know, affection is so withheld in this series, and it was one of the few moments where actual tenderness is allowed its moment, you know, and it was Shiv giving Kendall a hug at one of his particularly low points. And yeah, we had the city outside the windows, and it was showing the office in a light that was not kind of like daytime business as usual. It was a little after hours, a little folks there late.
Come here. Give me a hug. Come here.
You a hug? Hey. You okay?
I would just ask that you take care of me. Because if Dad didn't need me right now, I don't exactly know what I would be for.
You want to talk some more?
I really can't. But, hey, thank you. Yeah, it ain't gonna be me.
The effect of it was really like kind of got me in the chest because it was such a rare occurrence to have that sentiment permitted.
This scene was opposite of what we normally did. It had affection, it had nighttime, it had actors working a frame together, which was really fun to do.
Another signature element of Succession's visual storytelling is a unique way the camera moves with the action. In the pilot, cinematographer Andrei Parek and director Adam McKay established a shooting style that Pat continued throughout the series. Shaky handheld shots, constant zooming in and out, sometimes even cutting over to characters after they've already started speaking.
It was a sense of reality that not every camera move is perfectly timed out, and not every focus shift is totally, you know, if you're doing a feature and you're doing the cinema style, you would do a couple of takes and you'd say, oh, you were late on the focus. That's what makes it a photojournalistic kind of fly on the wall experience. That sometimes if you're in a crowd and you look over, you might only catch the end of a sentence. And listen, we would discuss every scene before we started shooting it, a philosophy of where the camera should be and what we're trying to do. But the operators had freedom to what's known as left eye camera operating. So your right eye is looking through the camera, but your left eye is seeing what the cast is doing. And if you see something that the audience would be really interested in, they have the freedom to do it. No one's going to say, what the hell are you doing? Who told you to pan over there? That didn't exist on this show. And, you know, if it was really a silly move, we would say, oh, don't do that again. But for the most part, they were right on every time.
Yeah, Pat operated almost as a conductor of these incredible sort of dancers, you know, behind the cameras. And yeah, they really took lots of liberties, but in the best kind of way. And I love that. It felt really energetic and alive and perfect for the material.
It even got to the point where the camera operators were almost improvisers themselves, excited to find out what would happen next.
I don't know if you remember the scene where Greg and Tom are having a water bottle fight in the lockdown.
Hey, Tom. We're good. We're good.
We're good? We're good? Because it doesn't feel fucking good, Greg!
Can we...
I will not let you do this to me! I will not let go of what is mine!
What am I doing? Ow! Stop pumping! Stop! Stop! Security!
And we're locked in this room with 2 operators and 2 people throwing water bottles, and how are we going to make this work? And after one take, one of the actors says to Greg or the operator, I'm going to jump under the table after. I'm going to hide under the table. He goes, don't tell me that. He goes, I want to discover it. I'll find you there. If you tell me, how am I going to act surprised? How's the audience going to be surprised that you do it?
Guys,
no, you back off! You back off! This is executive level business. Okay? No!
Stop, Tom! We're friends! You're one of my best friends!
No marks. People pretty much went wherever they wanted. In fact, if you did give them a mark, they would purposely go somewhere else. So I would describe it as photojournalistic, fly-on-the-wall cinematography.
When it comes to the homes in Succession, even though their decor is mostly impersonal, Steven and his team still use these sets to add to the storytelling. For instance, in season 3, we watch the disintegration of Tom and Shiv's marriage as they say the most painful things they can think of on the balcony of their gleaming open-air penthouse.
I wonder if we shouldn't clear the air.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I'm sure.
I think that you can be a very selfish person, and I think you find it very hard to think about me.
What?
And I think you shouldn't have even married me, actually.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
What the actual fuck?
That apartment is full of sharp edges and a terrifying set of floating stairs. So it's a little surprising to look back and realize that when we first see Tom and Shiv at home, they're eating breakfast together and talking about their day in a much smaller, cozier, relatively low-key apartment.
Honey, growing up, I used to look at the pictures of the Reckney in Mom's Vanity Fairs. And now, a little boy from St. Paul's going with the most beautiful gal in the world.
It was a combination of having sort of some unanswered questions about the characters in season 1 that hadn't been decided yet. And Jesse, I think, having ideas about Shiv and, does she split her time between Washington, D.C. as a, political consultant and New York? And so in season 1, we sort of said to ourselves, well, perhaps their main base is in D.C. and their apartment in New York is a bit more functional than their wealth level might normally dictate. But by the end of that season, especially when they were getting married, it became clear that no, they're going to hub in New York. And having them just getting married, newlyweds, gave us the perfect opportunity to upgrade their digs. And so, as we were preparing for season 2, we spent a lot of time scouting for the right apartment. And this particular one on Lower Broadway, very close to City Hall, presented itself. And there were times where people were worried that it was a little too small, but cinematically it had great angles and, natural light and views on multiple sides. It also had this great staircase with individual steps cantilevered out from a wall and with the tiniest, thinnest wires providing the sort of handrail. They were steel and they were wrapped with a custom leather, each tread, very specific and very precarious. And I sort of loved how that precariousness was a great metaphor for their life moving forward. It doesn't feel safe in any way. If you fell down the stairs, you would probably break through one of those stories of glass and end up on Broadway, 28 floors below.
But how do you get access to these incredibly expensive apartments and mansions that the actual 1% live in? According to Steven, as the show progressed and began to win awards, more people were willing to let them into their spaces. Another option? They'd see if they could spend a week or two shooting in empty apartments for sale that no one else could afford to buy.
I remember when we were shooting the episode with Rava's apartment, we found a penthouse. Oh, actually, it wasn't a full penthouse. It was a high-rise apartment, but it was on the market, and I think they were able to move it along, in part because of the press that us shooting there gave it.
Yeah. Even the house in the Hamptons was a house that was on the market. So our location team would find properties that are for sale because we knew that 2 months from now it'll still be there, most likely. Even if they get a contract on it, they're not going to move in by then. But Mark Mylard would walk into a location and hemming and hawing whether he likes it. And he goes, well, how much is this for sale? Well, this is $20 million. Find a $40 million. And we would leave because that's how he based it. These people wouldn't buy a $20 million. Yeah.
Speaking of Rava's apartment, her space seems to be the only exception to the show's pristine, impersonal style. When Kendall invades her space to make his new headquarters in season 3, we see a bike in the hallway, patterned curtains on the walls, personal artwork, and somewhat colorful decor.
There was an opportunity with characters like Rava's who, they're within the orbit of the Roy family, but have sort of broken away from that gravitational pull in a way. Greg is, for example, is being sucked into that gravitational field. Rava is actually breaking free of it.
I love you.
Okay. Well, thank you. Noted.
We did things like adding curtains to windows that didn't have curtains and trying to make choices where the fabrics that we used were more patterned and more considered, I guess, than some of the typical white on whites that we would have used for, or textured but without strong patterns that we might have used for some of the other interiors. I wanted to sort of express a little more personal investment in her environment, and that Kendall really has brought his toxicity back into her space when he takes it over as his sort of war room at the beginning of season 3.
Surprise, surprise.
You came here for what?
No, just the press. They're storming mine, and I need a hidey hole for meetings. Plus, I actually wanted to see you and the kids. I kind of it was kind of for you guys.
Yeah, well.
Greg, on the other hand, went from very meager digs early on to having to sort of, be given an apartment by Kendall.
It's just going to be empty. It's not a big deal.
Kendall. What, dude? Dude, thank you so much, man. Wow. Look at these ceilings.
Yeah, nice height. You got big windows, a lot of light.
He started, when we had an apartment to really sort of show some of his tastes, he had things like a poster of Three Penny Opera on the wall, and he had I think there was a reggae poster in there as well, some things that sort of harken back to his past that were less tethered to the Roy family. But you can kind of imagine all that stuff is going to be eaten away by the acid of the Roy family, and pretty soon he'll be in a place that has, homogenous art that looks just like everyone else's.
Hey, Greg. What are you drinking? I'm not sure. It's a rosé. It's not my favorite.
You got a favorite champagne now?
Well, you can't help noticing. It's fine. I'll drink it. It's just not my favorite.
Back on set with Succession, let's return to Rava's apartment. A crucial scene takes place there in season 3, when the siblings have a confrontation inside Kendall's daughter Sophie's preteen bedroom.
Don't touch any of her shit. Okay, so it's pretty simple. Let's gang up on Dad and take him down.
Jesus, let me shut the door first.
Eagle-eyed viewers zoomed in on the details in the background, like pictures of Kendall's daughter with Billie Eilish and Harry Styles. In order to design that room with accuracy, Stephen had to do a special kind of research.
I actually have 2 daughters. My younger daughter is about the age that Sophie would have been in that episode, and I tried to imagine, okay, if she had, unlimited privilege and a dad who would spoil her with all kinds of backstage access passes, what else would be in there? And those were kind of the result of my quizzing my daughter, saying who would you like to have your photograph taken with if there's anybody in the world? And so there you have it. Thanks, Lillian.
While so much thought and care and work has to go into designing a show like Succession, there are a few fun perks to telling the story of the Roys.
Well, there's a lot of fun to be had designing for people this rich. I mean, first of all, the locations we get to survey and scout are phenomenal. From season 1, we were, New York is home for me, but we were also in New Mexico, we were in England, and then season 2, we were in Scotland and Iceland and, Croatia.
The challenge for me in these great locations is not to make it look cinema. How do you go to Tuscany and not shoot the beautiful trees and the different color fields and the roads? How do you go to Norway and go to the top of this mountain? And the day we went there, we were above the clouds. And we knew that as soon as Jesse Armstrong would get there, he'd be like, this is too much like James Bond. Why are we here? To have that fight between the 3 siblings in a dirt road outside the wedding, that was the hard stuff to find. It's very easy to go to these locations and find postcard, go to any book on cinema and it'll tell you where to shoot. But to find these locations in between Stephen and Mark Mylod and myself trying to find the opposite that we talked about earlier, that really made the story work. Yeah. It was the underbelly. It was the opposite. And trying to dirty up Tuscany was damn hard.
For every beautiful setting that we had, we always tried to find a couple of counterpoints of, like the scene that Pat mentioned where Kendall finally confesses to his brother and sister about the car crash at the end of season 1.
I'm not a good person.
Come on. Lighten up, Glum Glum.
I killed a kid.
What?
I killed a kid, and they're coming for me. They're gonna come for me.
Is this real?
It was helped by the fact that it was incredibly dry and dusty, and the wind kept whipping up and was blowing dust in people's eyes. That was just nature at work, which was serendipitous. But we added the trash cans out there. We staged some guys bringing out empty bottles and dumping them into the trash can.
Hey, asshole, dad would never sell, right?
I don't know.
Would he? And if he did, would we get, would we get fucking protection?
Can you guys just do this without me?
Just to break it up a little bit, because that was the sort of thing that Mark loved, to interrupt with some ugly reality.
Even when they're out scouting for beautiful, extravagant venues, as visual storytellers, Stephen and Pat are still looking for spaces that communicate something deeper about the Roy family.
The yacht in season 3 or 2, it was not just the logistics of what yacht can we get at this time in Croatia. We were very picky as to which yacht we wanted to use. It had to be just that tackiness of the Roys. In Tuscany, we looked at so many villas, so many places for that last scene to take place. And none of them had the bones of that rectangular room that was so bare and yet so aristocratic for Logan.
The final scene he's referring to is the season 3 finale. After his ex-wife Caroline's Tuscan wedding reception, Logan has assembled a team to plan the Gojo merger at a villa away from his children. In order to stop him, the siblings form a temporary truce and share a van to go confront him at his villa-turned-war room.
I do think that even though this literally makes me want to vomit and I want to kill you both every day and it's all going to end horribly, I do think that you could make a pretty good team.
So, how do we feel about killing Dad? Mixed feelings?
Pass me the fucking shotgun.
Okay. Rome, you win.
Okay. Fuck. Okay.
The final villa that was Logan's fortress, for lack of better. I always sort of thought of he was holed up in this much more boxy, much less ornamented villa that, it's the boxiness and the strength of that building felt like, okay, this is where Logan is making a stand of sorts, and the kids have to, to breach the walls.
We good?
Yeah.
I'm good. You good, Rome?
Yeah. You can handle this?
Been basically planning it since we were 4.
It was very different from the loveliness of La Foce, where we shot Lady Caroline and her reception with Peter Munyon.
So here's to the bride and groom.
bride and groom.
That's an incredibly beautiful and sensitive villa. And Chettinali, where the wedding actually took place, was another feeling as well. And so by the choices that we made of these incredible locations, we were able to sculpt the dynamics across the episodes that we shot there. And we were doing that every country we visited.
In the case of the Norway episode, where the Waystar Royco execs joined Mattson and the Gojo team on a retreat, Steven had his work cut out for him.
The Norway episode was really his company on, a retreat, like a trust-building retreat. Ha. So what we were trying to do was sort of say, like, hey, this is a company that is very different in its DNA from Waystar. These guys get out in the woods, they do physical activities, they throw axes, they do hikes, they gather mushrooms.
Sure, they're young and they're fit, but they're European. They're soft. Hammocked in their social security safety nets, sick on vacation mania and free healthcare.
It was basically there to contrast the corporate cultures between this, the Viking raiders coming for Waystar and our group of C-suite New Yorkers. In that respect, we were looking for all those kind of opportunities to accentuate the nature and the proximity to nature. And the spaces that we shot in were all pretty small, actually, very small compared to what we're used to. But that leaned into that fish out of water quality for the C-suiters.
Yeah, that resort that we shot in Norway got very small, very repetitive, very quickly. And we had so many scenes to do. Steven built the sauna that would overlook the lake. We broke out into other buildings to make it look like more corporate gathering areas.
The gondola that takes them up to the sort of overlook restaurant where, or headquarters where Mattson first meets with Kendall and Roman, that was an hour and a half away. And we used some CGI to put the gondola into the background of one of the other shots. But they were, we were essentially doing some creative geography there.
So what's the plan?
Up on the ridge, crunch time.
Yeah,
Good.
Very good. Yeah, thanks.
Good.
Yeah.
Great.
Great.
Good. Great.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's take it to the ridge.
Rocket, fellas.
Shut up.
It's fun knowing all of the problem solving and research that goes into telling this kind of story. One that feels like a real family, made up of uniquely damaged people living in a distinct social bracket in a specific moment of time. But what's even more fun is how all those details come together in such a way that we forget we're watching someone's work.
I think with Steven, it's when you get on a set, it looks like he didn't do anything. But I know for a fact what he's done. And I know for a fact that he's brought this whole, as he describes, the Roy family and their comings and goings and people breaking out of it and people trying to get into it. And all of that is in the sets. And more importantly, when we scout, the two of us sometimes find ourselves away from Jesse or Mark and trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to light this? How can you help me light this? What can we put in? What's practical that's believable? And that's the beauty of Steven's sets, is that they tell the story and they make it manageable to film. And he has the reality of what it takes to do a show.
Well, and I think for, beyond the fact that the photography was always stellar, my take on our collaboration is that Pat was always incredibly open to discuss the problems. And, there are those that sort of try to pretend that there aren't problems, and there always are. And the real key to success is to acknowledge them and pinpoint them and deal with them, and then get creative about them. And you actually figure out, well, how do you turn this into something even better, an advantage,
To hear Steven and Pat talk, it sounds like there was at least one functional family that got to enjoy the world of the Roys.
Yeah, the way this crew sort of morphed into a family and collaborated as seamlessly as we did was probably the treat of treats.
Traveling around the world together in exotic locations didn't hurt.
Yeah.
If you want to revisit the beautiful, dysfunctional world of the 1% and experience Steven and Pat's work firsthand, watch Succession only on Max. To learn even more about the designers from this episode and others, check out hgtv.com/onsetwithpod. If you'd like to watch On Set With, you can find us on Max or HGTV Home on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. On Set With from HGTV and Max at Warner Brothers Discovery is produced by Spoke Media. Next time, we're on set with the team who figured out how to create a massive world spanning 7 kingdoms, all vying for an Iron Throne.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. There is no middle ground.
I'm SuChin Pak. Thanks for listening.